Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Bon Voyage Besties with your amazing hosts, Rachel and Rosa. This podcast dives into travel and friendship, and we have a very special and amazing guest with us. Her name is Leah Arao, aka LA in Flight. She is a travel agent, content creator, event manager, proud auntie, and also the co-host of award-winning Ticket to Anywhere podcast. And she has lived all over the place in Las Vegas, all over South America, and Melbourne, Australia. Leah now resides in Los Angeles and works around the world. So please welcome Leah to the show. Woohoo!
Thank you. Wait, Rachel, you pronounce Melbourne like an Australian.
Yeah, all the backpacking that I've done in hostels,
I love it.
I have that name firmly ingrained in my head that it's Melbourne. It's not Melbourne, it's
Yes.
Melbourne. I stumbled over some of the other words, but that one I nailed perfectly.
Yeah. Thanks, ladies. Congrats again on the podcast and excited to be here.
Thank you.
So would you like to give us a brief introduction about your travel style to start us off?
Sure. You covered a lot of who I am, but yeah, travel style really boils down to slow traveler and bougie backpacker. I would say solo travel, but I think a lot of people just kind of add it into their title. And I'm like, oh, well, but like, what makes me different? I'm like, if everyone's solo traveling, then like, I guess I am too, but how else could I describe it? But I do love a bougie backpacker because I will go stay in a 12 dorm hostel and then go pay like $250 for a 14-course meal with friends. Which I've done before. I did this when I was in Peru, basically like the same year of things that we're going to talk about today. That year was wild, but yeah, I would still do things like that. I'm like $10 for a hostel bed, but $300 for dinner, no problem.
It evens out.
I did that in Osaka, actually. I was staying at a hostel, and it was like, I forget the cost per night, but it was really reasonable. And I took myself out to a Michelin star restaurant that was like 12 courses and $300.
Hell yeah. I mean, I look at, like, don't get me wrong, I love a nice hotel room. Who doesn't? But I constantly struggle with, I look at how much time I'm spending in a hotel room, and there are times where I'm literally up 6 a.m., out the door at 7, don't get back till midnight. And I'm like, okay, so I'm paying $600 a night for 4 hours in the room. And then some days I'll be like, okay, when I want to go out or when I want to utilize the room, but then I'll have to like skip out on some plans somehow to just stay in the room. I don't know. It's more prevalent when you have less time in a place to be like, okay, like, do I really want to spend money on the hotel room? Which is not even like the base of what we're talking about today, but I'm like, oh, bougie backpacker forever.
We can totally relate to that. I mean, I haven't done the hostels, but I do kind of sometimes look for deals when it comes to accommodations because I have the same train of thought. If I'm not going to spend that much time, as long as the place is clean, it's in a good location, and I've booked places that have not been clean or in a great location because I've gone like on reviews. I'm like, oh, this looks like a great deal, but that's a topic for another session. But same thing. I'd rather spend my money on places to eat and experiences. Unless I'm going to be somewhere where I am going to spend more time in the hotel, I personally don't feel the need to spend that much money.
Yeah, 1,000%. We can really relate to this because I think, Rosa, it was our first episode where you said your travel style was bougie on a budget. So I feel like the vibes are good. The vibes are good.
Yes, exactly. Totally. We can travel together.
On a budget. I love it. And then when I read this all the time now, it's like when I say backpacker, like that means I use a backpack. It doesn't mean like use a backpack to go to hotels. It doesn't mean I'm like camping in the woods. That's when people are like, oh, you're a backpacker. I'm like, no, I'm like the bring a backpack to a hotel type of backpacker, not like through hiker, Pacific Crest Trail type of backpack.
Ever, I would die. One time, this was going back years ago, I had that I was a backpacker on Tinder. And people thought that meant that I was like a hardcore camper when it really just meant that I stayed in hostels. So I get these messages like, hey, like, what are your thoughts on this like 5-day hike? I was like, what are you talking about? That's not me.
You're like, that's not me. Every tent that I've ever stayed in outdoors has been pitched by someone else. So do not ask me for tent advice. I have no idea. I'm like, oh, here, let me hand you the sticks.
That's so funny. It's like, don't judge a traveler by its backpack, people.
I know. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, mine's too clean to be a backpacker through the woods.
I love it. And I love this whole concept about slow travel. I know for me, so I work full time. So when I do travel, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to be strategic because I have limited amount of PTO each year. So when I'm
Yeah.
traveling to a destination, unfortunately, I'm usually there for like a week or maybe it's 2 weeks tops.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to be the kind of person where I'm like, okay, I have to jam pack everything into my itinerary. And more often than not, it was cool to see a lot of the landmarks and popular destinations, but we were tired. We would come back home.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we had a great trip, it wasn't as enjoyable. So the concept of slow travel is something that I personally have been incorporating into my travel style over the last like 2 years. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious to know for you, how long have you been doing the slow travel and what has been like one of your favorite destinations?
Right. So for slow travel for me, like I told you before we started hitting record, I had a big lifestyle change recently where I was freelancing for a long time and now I'm back in the corporate nine to five world, if you will. So slow travel was more like taking weeks and months maybe to be in a destination or a country and take that time. And then the definition of slow travel, I think everyone has a different definition of it because now people like you who can only take a week in a destination, it's like more of selecting the things that you want to do, right? And not packing everything in. So yeah, it's shifted a bit for me and I'm new in this full-time role, but I did ask, I'm like, hey, the days that we're not in office, like, can we work from another country? And I was like holding my breath. I'm like, what are they gonna say? They're like, oh yeah, we have people that work from Asia all the time because I work for a marketing agency and it's multicultural. Most everyone there is mostly Asian. So a lot of people go back home and visit their families. I'm like, oh my God, it just opened the floodgates for me. I was like, I can go work from Panama for 6 days of the week because I only have to be in the office one day a week. I can go to Mexico for the weekends, all different sorts of things. It was really exciting. But that's luck. That's sheer luck. Happy that it's still letting this new phase of my life is still letting me retain that slow travel portion, even though like, oh yeah, 4 days in a place is not a lot, but it's making do with what I do have available, right? A few years ago, if I were going to Panama, I'd probably stay there for like a month or two. But now that I have to be in an office a day a week, there's some limitations. But some of the destinations, I'd say favorite destinations, I'd say off
I know
the
that's
top
a
of my
tough one.
head,
It's so hard.
it's tough. But what I'll do, and it's, everyone's like, oh, I usually love one thing about every destination, but I'll give you my favorite destinations, like certain continents. Like, absolutely love the Philippines, but I'm biased because my family's from there. And I'm also going twice this spring. I know I'm crazy, but that's because of the new work
That's a long
schedule. I'm
flight.
going twice. Yeah, it's a
Amazing.
long flight. It's going to be wild and I'm going to be working West Coast USA hours, which is also really
Oh,
rough.
wow.
Yeah, because it's like 15 hours ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, but I'm obsessed with the Philippines. Taiwan is a new favorite. I spoke at the LA Travel and Adventure Show, was moderating the wonderful panel a few weeks ago, and one of the questions is always like, "Oh, what destination would you recommend for first-time solo travelers?" And the panel I was on a few years ago, almost all of us has said Thailand. But this year, I was like, "Wait, Taiwan has risen to the top of my list because of ease of public transportation, how affordable it is, getting around everywhere. You could visit the whole island in probably like a week or something." So I would put Taiwan as one of my new favorite destinations. I really love Colombia. I stayed there for 3 months and traveled around. Whole different conversation, but I also feel like because I could pass for Latina and blend in a little more, I'm not hassled as much.
Yeah.
That's a whole different conversation. Like basically I don't stick
They're not
out and
trying to
I'm
sell
not
you
bothered.
something. I
Yeah.
love Colombia, but yeah, they try to hustle you.
Yeah, and it's just like, unfortunately in some areas, like you're a target versus a tourist, and people don't really glance at me. And then when I open my mouth to speak Spanish, they're like, oh yeah, she's a gringa for sure. So, but walking around, I don't get hassled. So, really love Central America in general. Like, I just got back from El Salvador a month ago,
I've
and
heard good things.
it's incredible. And I really wanted to go there before it turned into like the next Mexico or Guatemala. So glad I did. I was only able to spend 3 weeks there, but it's much tinier country than I thought it was. So it's really easy to spend 3 weeks there.
You named so
But
many
yeah,
great
those are a few of my
places.
favorite places. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm excited how you're going to navigate, working from the Philippines, like you said, and being a completely different time zone. So I know you're not new to this. You've done this before. I know I was looking at your Instagram, so I know you've traveled and done kind of like, the whole workation concept. So what are
Hmm.
some tips for traveling while working remotely that you may have?
Oh my gosh. I'll do it the hardest way first. Like working in the time zone of your original like workplace, right? Which I'll be doing. I'll be 15 hours ahead. Really, I think I'm going to have to make a couple sacrifices and shift some things around. Because I was thinking about it. My working hours are going to be like 1 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Wow.
1 a.m. to
That's,
9 or 10 in the Philippines.
yeah.
Yeah, it's literally like a swing night shift, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, naps during the day, obviously. Luckily, Filipinos get things started late sometimes. So, if I can kind of take a quick cat nap before work gets off, like a mid morning one, that'll be great. Maybe having to sacrifice skipping out on some nighttime plans in order to like sleep from 8 to midnight. You know what I mean? I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably enough to get me through the workday. I think I will be a little extra tired, but I think being in the Philippines will be worth it.
For
Yeah. I hear
sure.
great things. I personally haven't been, but I hear it's beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it's so stunning. Next, when you ladies go, I will help you plan everything.
Yes,
I will
Perfect.
help you
please. I
plan
would love
everything.
that. That would be amazing. I can only go in the sweltering heat of summer,
Yeah.
though, but I'm sure I'll
Oh
manage.
yeah. Well, I know, and our summer's tough because it's like monsoon season
I
over
Yeah.
there.
know, right?
I mean, you will get like the cheapest rates on everything because
Save
it's
some
not a high tourist
money.
season.
Save some money.
Yeah.
And I guess the other benefit is like with my job, you don't have a boss bothering you over the summer. So there is
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Exactly.
It's radio silence. It's great. But yeah, I love this
Yeah.
idea of slow traveling too and just spending a lot of time in a certain destination. I can get that a little bit with the summer because as a teacher, I only work 10
Hmm.
months out of the year. So that gives me 2 months to kind of stay wherever
Yeah.
I want, which is great. I've done like 7 weeks backpacking Europe, 3 weeks in
That's
Japan.
awesome.
It's amazing. But when you're traveling for that long, and this is a friendship podcast, we like to talk
Hmm.
about our friendships with other people. It can be kind of difficult to make friends because at first it may feel exciting, but for that long you start wanting a sense of community. So were there any challenges that you faced with making friends while you were traveling in one place for a month or more?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like I get my heart broken weekly. Whether it's like
Aw.
by a friendship or when I'm traveling and I'm like meeting new people because I am such an extrovert and I'm very like emotional extrovert as well. I don't want to say like emotionally attached. I don't want to put that label on me, but some cases I can be. And when I say, oh, get my heart broken, I mean by friendships, platonic relationships, romantic relationships, like have a little travel romance and then both of us are off to the next place and it's a
Oh my
different
God,
place
don't get
each.
me started on that
I
one.
know. I have so many of them. That sounds like weird. So many, but like, they were just like, oh my God, you just had the best like 5 days together. And now, okay,
And now they're
see you
going
never.
back home, and then you never see them
Yeah,
again.
see you never. And then with friendships, I think, it's interesting watching a lot of them grow. Like, now that I'm a few years past or 9 years past, I literally right before we got on, the friend in question that I'm going to talk mostly about or like what the title is based on, I messaged her and I was like, yo, Kate, I'm about to go on a podcast and I'm going to talk about our story because her and I see each other every other year now, but we met bartending across hostels in Peru and we've stayed good friends. And she's probably the best, closest friend I've made from my travels because here we are 9 years later, still meeting up, still traveling, still hanging out. And she lives in London. I live in LA. We're far away. But yeah, I've seen the friendships shift and the ones that you think will last maybe don't last the same way that you imagine they would when you're taken out of that environment. And it's tough. I think you get out of it what you put into it. Some people have different communication styles. So it's just molding to those and accommodating those. But I always think it's worth the effort. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I have a friend. We met at T-Back Stockholm, and we're still
Oh my
really close to
gosh.
this day. Yeah, we're still close to this day. She lives in Liverpool, but we'll see each other maybe like once every other year. But we do talk every
Hmm.
day on Instagram and send like reels and memes back and
Every
forth.
day?
Yeah, almost every day.
Proud of you.
I'll just like open up Instagram and I'll see like a really funny like reel sent from her, or we'll just send like ridiculous memes back and forth. But yeah, it can be definitely tough because I'm in the New York metro area in New Jersey and
Hmm.
she's in Liverpool right now. She's in Portugal, and that time difference can be difficult if you want to maintain
Yeah.
a friendship. And I've stayed in touch with as many people as I can, but like you said, sometimes like those friendships drift and shift apart, or they only last for like that week that you're in that hostel. And it can
I know.
be sad, even though it's such a short amount
It
of
is
time, it
sad.
still feels really real.
Yeah. I think it's because you meet on that same experience and you're very much on that same brainwave when you arrive in that city at that time, right? Everyone's like hyped because we're about to do this cool walking tour, or you experience like the rooftop together, however it is. So you're kind of put in that environment at the same time and you're maybe looking for the same things to explore a new place. So you've already bonded, right? You're not being forced into something or a group situation. So having that shared experience to base it off of, I think that's what makes it really special.
And I think nowadays too, with social media, it does make it a little bit easier to kind of stay in
Yes.
touch. I know for me, I work in real estate development, so I deal with a lot of customer service. So when I travel, I'm like the complete opposite. I'm like a total introvert. I don't really want to talk to people. I kind of don't really want to make friends.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of want to decompress. My partner's the
Hmm.
complete opposite, so we always joke around. We're like, okay, Vacation Mike is at it again. He's like making friends, and like, sometimes he tells me stories, and I'm like, who are you talking to? He's like, oh yeah, remember the guy we met at a bar in Spain from Ireland? And I'm like, you still talk to him? That was like 4 years ago.
That
So
is so
it's
funny.
hysterical. My daughter and I were always cracking up because everywhere we go, he makes friends. Like, he's taking pictures, he's giving people his number, and I'm like, who is this guy? Like,
That's
complete
so funny.
opposite of how he is back
Oh my
home. So we
gosh.
kind of
Is
like
it
switch
really?
roles. So I think it's funny when, he's still communicating with people that he meets abroad. And it's nice
Yeah.
because, like, I know recently we went to London and he was telling me, he's like, oh, so and so was just there. And we had met him and his wife when we went to Egypt last year. And he was giving him
Hmm.
a ton of recommendations on things to do, places to eat. So I think it is nice, especially with social media, that you can kind of maintain some of these long distance friendship
Yeah.
a little bit easier and still feel like you know what they're up to. You're seeing like some of their stories or their posts. So you still feel like you're kind of part of their lives, even though you might
Hmm.
not necessarily, like Rachel, get to talk to her friend every day, but you
Yeah.
kind of still maintain those relationships.
Yeah. Have you seen that meme that's like, oh, just randomly watching that random person you met on a Tuesday at a hostel 11 years ago, like watching their life unfold on social media? It's just so funny. I'm like, that is me in so many different way, shape, and form, across all the people I've met. Some people, it's kind of crazy. Like, you'll just hang out, you'll go to like a party and you'll have hung out together for 6 hours. And then all of a sudden you're like social media friends. But some of my coolest, I feel like, reunions in certain countries have been with that. Like, for example, there's this Dutch guy I met on literally the top of Machu Picchu. Me and my bartender friend Kate, we went up to Machu Picchu together. We got separated from our tour group because she forgot her passport. We had to run back to the hostel to get it. And then we lost our tour group. We met this tall Dutch guy at the top who also lost his tour group. So the three of us hung out for the next like 3 hours on the top of Machu Picchu. 3 hours, that was it. And then we all got separated again going back down. But before that, he quickly got my Facebook or something. Yeah, Facebook Messenger. And, he's slightly kept in touch with each other's lives over the past 9 years now at this point. And I told him, it's like, oh, I'm going to be in the Netherlands. This was last June. I hadn't seen each other in 8 years. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, we're just chatting. Oh, I don't think I have time to see you, though. Sorry. And then, like, my plans fell through. And he's like, well, why don't you just, like, come stay with me? And then I'll give you, like, a tour around, we'll go here, here. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that could work. Are you sure, though? He's like, yeah, I'll just, like, shift my schedule. Work is really flexible. And so we basically reunited for like 4 days after 9 years. And it was
Nice.
crazy because I'm like, I did not know if I was ever going to see you again. Like, you don't go to the States, and he has like a daughter now. So he doesn't get to leave the country as much. I'm like, don't really go to Europe like a ton just because I go to different places where my dollar stretches a little further because that month in Europe last summer definitely robbed my wallet. But I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be here. Yeah, let's hang out. I mean, let's see if we can make it work. And we did.
That's so
So
cool.
it's really interesting. Yeah. And we literally hung out for 3 hours on Machu Picchu the first time. That was it.
Wow.
Wow.
And sometimes you just click and you're bonding over the experience, but it is
Yeah.
nice when you're able to kind of maintain that friendship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. And something similar actually just happened to me in Japan this summer. Years ago, it had to be like it was 2016. I don't want to do the math because it makes me feel
Yeah.
really old, but I was in the Baltics and we were all kind of following like the same like tourist trail. I
Yeah.
met and it was like a big group of us, and I was like one of the only girls, so it was me and a bunch of guys, and it was one of those trips where they all kind of blurred together. I won't say that I was out late every night, having a good time, but
Yeah.
I remember one of the guys, he had walked me back from a club in Estonia to make sure I got back safe. And I don't think we really spent all that much time, just the two of us talking individually on the trip. But fast forward to the summer, I posted I'm going to Japan, I'm going in Tokyo. And he sends me a message like, hey, like I remember traveling together in the Baltics. Let's meet up in
Yeah.
Tokyo. Well, we ended up meeting twice. And the one night it was like for something like 5 or 6 hours, just like talking and catching up and laughing and reminiscing about the trip. And then we met up again on my second to last night, just going to a little bar and talking about everything going on in our lives. And it was the most fun ever. And it was the same thing. I was like, I followed you on social media, but I legit never thought I would see you
Yeah.
again. And here we are
Yeah.
in Tokyo just having an amazing time.
I love that so much. Yeah. It's crazy how just the smallest amount of time, sometimes, like you said, you'll click with someone and then you'll be able to meet up 10 years later like it was nothing. So cool.
So I'm
Yes.
curious to hear the story. How did you and Kate meet? So you said this was
Oh my
when
gosh.
you were traveling in Peru, right?
Yes, it's so funny because like I said, I told her that we were recording this right before we got on. And then she started like repeating back all of the funny memories we had. So I'm sitting there like reading it, listening to our voice notes. So I spent a year backpacking South America. And I
Nice.
started in Argentina, and then they got really expensive and really cold because, they're the southern hemisphere. So I was there for 6 months. And while I was there, I went to Uruguay, Chile, and Brazil. So I got to have like some nice holidays from being based in Buenos Aires. And then I moved to Colombia for 3 months and hopped around there, like kind of running my tourist visa out, which is, 90 days, 3 months. And I used Medellin as my home base. And then I said, okay, well, it was September. I was like, oh, I have to be in Cabo like mid-December for a birthday, but I'm not leaving this continent without seeing Machu Picchu. So I should just go to Peru because like I didn't really want to try to like extend a Colombian visa or overstay my visa. I don't want to do any of that. I was like, that's so much more trouble than it's worth. So like, let me go to a new country because I was really trying to practice slow travel at the time. I was like, how much time can I spend in one place? I'm like, you know what? Let me just go to Peru. I'd heard so much about it. And then I heard that, oh, this might be controversial these days. Because
We're
you
here
can go
for it.
work in hostels across Peru. Controversial in the fact that like, oh, are we taking jobs away from locals? Like
Yeah.
we were kind of there illegally, but whatever. This was
You're
back.
contributing
This is
to the
speaking.
economy through the, tourism. Okay.
This is speaking in past experience though, right? Like at
We're
the
all
time,
friends here.
I know. At the time, like, you don't think anything of this, but basically, it's like what's that one say? Like a workaway,
Yeah.
right? So you can go volunteer in these hostels, different hostels. You don't have to go be a bartender, but different hostels would be like, oh, we need front desk reception, or we need cleaners, or we need people to lead pub crawls. Well, I knew there were party hostels all across Peru because that's what they do best. They like party after all the 5-day treks that you go on, Machu Picchu, Rainbow Mountain, all the trails, Laguna, whatever. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I'll go do that because I am running out of money for being on the road for 10 months. And I was teaching English online on and off, And then I was doing some marketing consulting remotely, but nothing was like truly sticking. I was like, oh, I'm running out of money. So bartending wasn't going to pay me, but it was going to slow my money spending down because all you'd have to do is commit 2 weeks in a hostel bar. And in exchange, you get a bed in a dorm. Crazy dorm. It's a staff dorm, which I've never worked in hospitality in my life. So for my first bit of hospitality being like staff dorms in Peru at a bar is like absolutely out of this world. And you would get 40% off your bill and a free meal each day. And the meals were like massive North American size. So you could split it into like two or three meals. But I was like, that's definitely going to slow the money down. And then bartending in Peru as like a decent looking girl, like decent looking woman, I barely dropped a dime for drinks every week. Like people would just be buying them for me, which was like
a win-win.
Sweet.
It's so funny. It's just kind of crazy too, because the system for payment at the time, I'm sure it's still like this, but it was too easy because all you'd had was like a barcode on a paper wristband. And so good and bad, because you never needed to bring your phone, your credit card, your nothing to the bar. But at the same time, like people just like, yeah, just scan it, like do whatever. And then you wake up the next morning, you have to go to the front desk and be like, yo, how much did I spend last night? Can you tell me?
I'm bad enough with my credit cards. That would be it for me. I would be in the
My
red,
gosh.
the red.
I know. It was just, I just loved hearing how much people spent last night. So anyways, I did that and hopped around southern Peru of the same chains like Loki and Wild Rover. Amazing party hostels, had the best experiences. But when I tell people like I literally met my best friends in them, I did. Because the things that we saw and did, we were like, no one else will ever go through these same experiences we did in like our own little group. Like I got a tattoo down there with 5 other people. We all got like a paper airplane on a different part of our body. And so I met some incredible folks during our time down there. And, you know, I was bartending through Peru for like almost 3 months, started in Lima, then went down to Arequipa, then went back up to Cusco, which is the jump off point for Machu Picchu. Cusco is where I spent the most time. I was there for like 6 weeks at the Loki. Tried to get into the Wild Rover, but it's also dependent on space. Like Loki, for example, the one I bartended at was 300 beds, massive bar that locals and any non-hotel guests could enter through, which I think is a smart business decision actually, because then you're not only limited to the patrons staying at the hotel or hostel to fund the bar, right? So it was a massive hostel. They had 10 bartenders on staff at all times. And then your commitment was only 2 weeks. You could stay longer, right? But, you know, people were rotating out all the time. So what I did, I put on my old corporate self at that time, because I worked corporate for 5 years before I took a year off to go backpack South America. And I would email each bar manager like a week in advance. Be like, hey, I'm going to be in town in a week. Do you have any bar staff openings? You know, in obviously a more professional way. But they'd be like, oh, we don't know right this second, but could for sure come in when you're in town, and we'll have a little chat. It's kind of just like, you know, a little pre-interview just to suss out your character, yeah, and see how you are and whatnot. And then some of them would be like, oh yeah, we actually have someone leaving on Saturday, so that'd be perfect. You could like start next Wednesday. And so yeah, I got on staff in Cusco, and then people were rotating out. Some people were there way before I was, and they left way after I left. But then there were a few girls that came in, and Kate was one of them. And I remember being like, whose bag is that? Like, why is there someone else in this room? It was like a dorm of 7 people. Why was I complaining that there was another person? I don't know. And then the social media manager at the time, he's like, oh, that's the new girl, Kate. She's from the UK. And I was like, what? Okay, whatever, cool. And so I ended up meeting her at the bar. I was on shift that night. She came to the bar, said hi. We hit it off really well because like she's super chill, and we had a lot of fun. She started like 4 days before Halloween, and like the shifts, you don't get to request them. They just schedule you, but you're allowed to like switch them. You're like, hey, I want to hike Rainbow Mountain this day. Can I find someone to cover my shift? And they're like, yeah, sure. Because we're all volunteers. We're not getting paid. So I think Kate and I, like, we had worked together for 2 days. We worked together on Halloween. And I think that year, Halloween at that hostel was like, we brought in the most money ever. We like broke records for the company just because everyone was on staff that night, like all 15 of us, because it was a massive party at the hostel. And one of the stories she was telling me before we hit record today, she's like, do you remember Jacob was like, he put us on the bar together outside because we had an inside bar and an outside bar. Jacob was a bar manager, the one who also interviewed me. And she's like, yeah, Jacob put us on the bar together outside. And he was like, you two stick together and go sell as much beer as you can. And then he's like, yeah, do you remember, Leah? And you turned to me and said, see, Jacob put us together because we are awesome together and like we're besties, so we're going to crush it outside. And we did. Like everyone came outside because we were so much fun dancing, and you're literally like supposed to dance on the bars and tabletops. It's like real life Coyote Ugly. And so we would just like act out as much as we can and, you know, sell as much beer as we can. And he loved like scheduling us together because he knew we would attract a crowd and be a lot of fun. And so we basically, built our friendship through working at the bar together. And of course we were like roommates in the dorms, but it wasn't a bad deal. We only had to work 4 shifts a week out of 7 days. So you got 3 full days off. No, not at all.
That's
I mean,
really
granted,
nice.
the shifts were like technically 7-hour shifts, which sounds long. I guess the worst part about it was if you're working the night shift, you're starting at like maybe 6 or 7, but then you have to close the bar. And like sometimes when they were doing really good, they wouldn't close the bar till like 3 or 4 a.m. And then you got to clean the bar after.
Oh,
so sometimes the
no.
shift would turn into like a 10-hour shift. And then, as hospitality does, we all went out to the bars afterwards. So we'd be going to like a nightclub at 5 a.m. And we wouldn't get home till 9. So it was like true, like all the stories I had heard about people working in hospitality, I got to live them, but with foreigners from around the world in Peru. Like it was the craziest experience ever. And then we had a lot of locals. Like the locals were the bar backs and the bar managers and the hostel managers. So like we weren't taking all of their jobs. We were just the actual bartenders, the ones who were really not even bilingual, but the ones who were speaking the most English, I guess. That's who was working the bar. They would always ask us like, how much Spanish can you speak? I was like, I can speak enough to sell a beer, you know? But we always had the locals and the other bar staff and hotel staff always come out with us too, you know, if they didn't have an early shift the next day. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of bonding and a lot of time together.
It sounds like
That's-
an epic time. I'm like, sounds so cool. I'm like, I probably could have survived that in my early 20s. Now I think about that.
I
I'm
know.
like 5 a.m. Hell
Rosa,
no.
I wasn't even in my early 20s. Like, I was a granny compared to everyone I was bartending with. I was like, how am I doing this? But I think I also have really bad, like, FOMO where I feed off the energy of people around me, too. So I'm like, oh, if people are going out, then I'm going to go. Even the other day, some people were like, oh, we're going to walk a half hour back to the hotel. And I'm like, I really want to Uber. I just want to, like, go take a nap. And then all 9 of them were like, we're all walking back. I was like, fine, I'll walk back. Because I'm like, I'm not going to be the only one taking an Uber home.
Yeah, I'm like that too. Like when I stayed in hostels, I started traveling solo when I was 26, so not even in, my early 20s, and then like into my early 30s, and it was the same thing. There were people my age, but I would just like feed off that energy. Like when I'm home in New Jersey, I am in bed at like 8 p.m. with my candles going and my cat, but if I'm still in Spain, you bet I am out till 3 a.m. with everyone because I just feed off the energy. It's like contagious. It's amazing.
We're the same because I'm like, you won't catch me out in LA. I don't go out in LA. But I was like, find me in like Cape Town or El Nido or, Medellin, and I'll be out all hours of the day, but won't catch me out in Los Angeles.
I love it.
That's so funny. One thing I always tell people, the differences of like backpackers I'm sure you've heard the stories, even Rosa, even though you may not have been a backpacker hostel goer. But in Southeast Asia, very classic, like young, white backpackers, basically 17-year-olds who have like literally like on a gap year, never been away from home, using mommy and daddy's money to like backpack Southeast Asia. I mean, those are all very like general comments, and I'm like generalizing. Some people would say that's the scene there. Whereas if you go to South America, Central America, or Latin America in general, it's very different, which I love about that. It's a mature backpacker, a bit of a mature backpacker that still knows how to have fun. So people are still young, but also like most people I've noticed, I don't know, maybe I'm biased because I love like Central and South America, but like people will go and they'll try to learn Spanish, right? They'll invest in Spanish classes. They'll be there because they want to go on like the epic hikes that are around like the deserts and the waterfalls and whatnot. So it's like a different kind of backpacker. I feel like people start in Southeast Asia and then they kind of graduate to like going to South and Central America as a backpacker, because of course they still party and have a good time, but it's like sometimes nothing like what you see in Southeast Asia. It is very much a different vibe. Yeah. So
yes. So
and I think it's a good segue to like making friends, especially when you're traveling solo. One of my good friends, she travels by herself all the time, and she usually stays in hostels for that particular reason, just to be able to kind of have like, make those friendships. And even though she's fine doing things on her own, it's always nice to be able to connect with one or two people throughout the trip. And just recently she went to Guatemala, same thing. She met someone at the hostel. They did like the volcano hike.
Oh my gosh, she survived. They survived. It's literally like the hardest thing anyone will ever do in their lives.
And she came back home, she had like blisters, and it was like a whole like adventure, but she did it. And she probably wouldn't have done this experience unless she had connected with this other girl that she met at the hostel. So it's a great way to kind of meet people. So like you said, exactly. It's not just like party. I mean, that's one part of it, but it's also a great way to meet other people in this travel journey.
And I feel like I did this in El Salvador for a bit. I stay in hostels a lot when I'm traveling alone. to have the options of meeting other people. But a good example in El Salvador, my cousin and his wife, they're like just the downest people ever. They literally told me Christmas Day, as in like 2 months ago, they're like, hey, we're gonna fly on standby to El Salvador with you tomorrow because we're gonna jump on your trip. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because I love like down people like that. You know, they're like, we can only stay for a week because we know you're staying for 3, but like we would never go there by ourselves. And because you're going and it's only a 5-hour flight, we thought we'd join you. I was like, hell yes, you're gonna join me. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. But I told them where I was going, and I don't mind that we stay in different accommodations. But that's the funny part is like when I have family or friends from back home and I want to stay in a separate accommodation, which I don't do too much on purpose, but I had already planned the whole trip without them because I didn't know they were coming. So of course I'm like, oh, I'm going alone. I want to stay in hostel and meet people. Like they're not huge on meeting others unless, I don't know, we're in that type of situation. Whereas I go out and seek friends and people to hang out with, right? But because I was also with them, and I knew I was only going to be with them for 6 days, I wanted to spend as much time with them as possible. So on the flip side, I stayed in hostels, but for some of them, I didn't meet a single person because I was with my cousin and his wife the whole time, and we were doing our own thing, So I think it's interesting because I think kind of like your friend gives me the option to do what I want. I can be as introverted or as extroverted as I want.
Yeah, definitely. And what you said really rings true for me. I find when I travel with friends or family, I don't meet nearly as many people. Whereas when I'm traveling by myself, I will talk to a wall. I will talk to a stray cat on the street. I will talk to literally anybody. So I'm just very much an extrovert. But when I'm with like friends and family, I'm doing things with them, and I could not speak to a single soul outside of my circle. But the other thing that stood out to me, which I love when people do this, my one trip to Italy a couple years ago, it was originally going to be a solo trip. And then my friend from my book club was like, hey, this is really random. I know we don't know each other that well, but I would be down to go. And I want to book my ticket to Venice and go with you. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Like, let's just do it. So now we've gone on that Italy trip together. We've been to Spain together. We've been to France together. And we're doing a trip to Greece together. And it's going to be me and her.
Gosh.
And then my other friend who I actually met on a trip to Iceland like years and years ago, but then reconnected with. It's going to be the 3 of us because we had met in Paris last year.
So
now we're doing another
cool.
trip together. And it's just amazing. Like you said, I love people who are just like down to do things. And I really feel like they make the best travel companions. Like just be down to do things. It's fun. You never know where it's going to lead.
It makes me so happy. Like the same cousin and his wife, which by the way, short and tell, I'm like, they're my cousins. Like it sounds weird, but I'm like, it's just so much easier to be like my cousin and his wife because she's also been in our family for like 12 years. But 3 years ago, they got married in Bali. And I remember their wedding was pushed from October 2020 to 2022. And then when they finally like June 2022, Bali opened back up to the public, right? They call me up. They're like, hey, we're going to get married in Bali in 2 months. You remember that wedding we were supposed to have 2 years ago? Yeah, we're going to do it in 2 months. And I'm like, down. And they're like, you don't even know what dates it is. It's okay. It's okay. I know that I'm free in August. Down. I don't care where we're going. Just tell me like where I need to be, what time, and I'll pay whatever. I was like, hell yeah. It was my first time to Bali also. So I didn't want to miss out on that. But I think we know that amongst the 3 of us, it's like, oh, just tell us where and when, and we'll be there.
Yeah, I'm usually that person. I'm like, all right. I'll look at my calendar, have nothing else, and then I gotta come home and tell Michael, be like, hey, so guess what I'm doing? He's like, where the hell are you going now, Rosa?
Where are you going now? I love that.
Yeah. Sometimes I say
That's
yes
exciting.
too much.
No such thing.
Like good advice for anyone listening. Like if you are looking for people to travel with, find people who are just like down to do things. Or if you're somebody who's like, I don't know if I really want to do this, try to get out your comfort zone and be down to do things. You never know what's going to happen. So just be down to do things. It's a great piece of life advice in general.
And I mean, I think there's something cool too. I was gonna say with having friends abroad. So like my best friend, she's out in Portugal. So she moved there a couple of years ago, and now we always try to find destinations that are new to the 2 of us and kind of not necessarily like a middle point, but a new adventure. So like last year we went to Croatia together for like about 2 weeks, which was a ton of fun. Loved it. So it's nice when you do kind of have these friendships because now you're kind of like, all right, well, let's plan something, like let's meet up because you want to make sure that you're still cultivating and maintaining those friendships somehow. So I think traveling together, it's like a great way to kind of maintain that bond.
Yeah, 100%. I think something I struggle with, actually, it's good to talk about the downside because it's not always roses and butterflies, right? I have a particular friend who, we're together every single day. This is when I lived in Australia. We were like together every single day, talked all the time. But then when I left Australia, because I was there on a working holiday visa, we didn't keep in touch as much. And I felt like it was me kind of carrying the weight of the friendship because I would always reach out first and be like, how are you? And it'd be like left unread. And it took me kind of honestly like a few years to be like trying not to take it personally because I'm like, well, we were talking every day for like a year and a half. And like, I can't even get a hello, and I've talked to like all my other friends about it, but it's tough. You just gotta like chalk it up to different communication styles, which I've talked about earlier. And then, when I did see this friend, they had a stopover in like LA for a little bit. We got together and hung out for the entire day. Like everything was back to normal. And like I missed this person so much I like couldn't even be mad about the lack of communication. Because I'm like, how am I gonna spend my 12 hours with this person being mad? It's tough, but I think it's also weighing on a case by case basis, like which friendships are worth keeping around. I also at the same time was like, well, maybe she doesn't want to be friends with me anymore. But then if she didn't, like, what they wouldn't have agreed to like meet up with me for 12 hours on a stopover in LA or reached out and said, hey, I'm going to be in town for like 12 hours on a layover. So it's tough because I struggle with that sometimes too. I think it comes with what I look for in friendships is like, pretty consistent communication. That's across my romantic relationships too. It's like I like communication and I like a lot of it. But sometimes I see it in friendships and I'm like, it's harder when you're not in the same city,
Yeah.
or your different time zones is much harder. I think it's a cultural thing, it's good to talk about the hard side of it, like maintaining those friendships
Yeah.
when you've
Exactly.
separated.
And it could be a lot of work too, but like you said, you make it work. So like again, with my friend Michelle being in Portugal, we're in different time zones. I'm the type of person, I'm terrible with communication. That's like one of the things that I'm trying to be better. Like overall, as a friend, I'll send you like 1,000 memes and like funny stuff on Instagram all day long, but I probably won't say hello in like a week. But meanwhile, she's the complete opposite. We'll have these conversations, or like sometimes, she'll want to FaceTime or talk on the phone.
Yeah,
Whereas I'm
yeah,
just like, I'm busy during the day. So I have like a short period of time where we can kind of talk. And it's not because I don't love her or don't want to talk to her. Just sometimes,
right.
life happens. I do get busy. But like you said, it's all about making that time and that effort. So I am conscious that I'm like, all right, I need to set some time, at least like once or twice a week, check in and dedicate some time to make sure that I'm continuing with this friendship. Just because, we're miles away, I still want to make sure that, I'm kind of like putting the work in as well, just like with any type of
Yeah.
relationship.
100%. I'm still part of like all the group chats I've had with like really good friends that I've made across the world in different situations, Like my core group of friends when I lived in Australia, we still have our group chat. We call ourselves the Flaggies because we're all from different countries. So our like icon is like all the countries that we're from. But yeah, like the group chats make it easy to just do a blanket like, hey, how's everyone doing? Like big life update, new job or whatever, or big life update, new baby. Not me, them.
It does make it so much easier to connect. And like you're both saying, like making the time is so important. And just also being aware of different communication styles as well. Like I'm lucky that my friend and Liverpool and we have a similar communication style where we can send memes and we can text all day. But I
Mm-hmm.
know as a friend, I can be really bad when it comes to phone calls or FaceTime. I think because being a teacher, I have to be on all day. That by the
Yeah.
time I get back to my apartment, I'm like, the last thing I want to do is hop on a FaceTime with someone.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that I don't love them or don't care about them. It's just I need that time to compress. But I know that,
Decompress. Yeah.
yeah. And I know that
I was going
about
to ask
myself.
Rachel, like, do you feel that you maybe have more time to communicate or want to communicate, more energy to communicate during the summer, like your breaks off versus like the school year?
Yeah, definitely. Especially like during the times when I'm coaching, because if you coach a high school
Hmm.
sport, you are up at 5:30 in the morning, and then sometimes you don't get back till like, 6:30 if it's
And dealing with high school attitudes.
Like fun.
I'm like, you are brave.
Thank you. They're doll babies. Like, I love them dearly. I know some who have graduated, still like to follow my travels. And I love you all. You're awesome. Not a knock against you, I swear. But yeah, no, it's true because like it does take up a lot of like your emotional energy during the school year. So I feel like I am a little better when it's summer. And also like what can make it tough is just like the different schedules because I'm awake at 5:30 in the morning, but then I'm done at 2:30. But then my friends who are in corporate, they may not be available till like 6. And by 6, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of winding it down. I'm ready for like my dinner and bed. So it's definitely just trying to compromise and make room in the schedule. Like I know for me, when I coach soccer, I have a rule for myself. Like on the weekends, I'll dedicate one day where I don't talk to a single soul. And then I'll have another day where I'll go out and do something fun with friends. I think that was Rosa when you, I, and Brienne went up to the farm and did pumpkin picking. That was during soccer. I was like, okay, so like this Sunday I'll go out and do fall and fun things. But then that Saturday I just like hung out on the couch. But it's just like knowing that about myself and knowing when to compromise and having a schedule planned out.
No, it's good to kind of have that balance.
Yeah, actually, someone asked me, how are your resolutions going? I was like, I actually don't do resolutions anymore because I found that I just don't keep them. And if I do resolutions, it's like per quarter. But now what I've been doing the past few years, which is much easier and more of like a blanket resolution, is I have a word of the year, and my 2025 word of the year is balance.
I love it.
So kind of hit the nail on the head. Yeah, well, I knew going into it that I'd be going into this demanding job. So it's like, I need to like ground myself and be like, listen, you need to make time for yourself because sometimes I feel like I bite off more than I can chew when it comes to projects. But
I think we all
still
can relate
standing,
to that.
so.
I think we're all guilty of that. And I do the same thing when I travel, actually. So when I'm on a trip, I do sometimes need that time to unwind and have time to myself as well. So I have kind of a rule when I'm solo traveling, which is I'll go out to a museum by myself in the afternoon. But then when I come back, I love finding someone to go to dinner with or karaoke or to like go out and see the city at night. So I even do that balance when I'm traveling. And a follow-up question I actually have for you is I know a lot of friendships happen in hostels. I've met so many people in party hostels myself. They're wonderful. They're so much fun. But what are some other ways that allow you to make friends overseas? Like any like activities that really lend themselves well to that, or other situations you could put yourself in if you're really not a hostel type of person?
Yeah, I mean, hike Machu Picchu and meet some people at the top. But oh, this is great because I know I feel like, well, us being in the travel industry, this is like obvious, right? But we want to speak to people that are not in the travel industry. They're just like travelers, they're consumers. They're not maybe making travel content. Those that, don't want to stay in hostels. All those folks. I think the best advice I really have to give is hang out in the spaces and do the things that interest you. And you'll meet people that are on that same brainwave. So, for example, I don't know why this random Australian couple, I mean, they weren't even Australian. They were like American and Peruvian, but I met them in Australia on a wine tour. And even at the time, they were like 30 years older than me, but I always saw them as like mom and dad for the day on this 4-hour wine tour just because the husband, he's American, the wife's Peruvian. Oh my God, I lived in Peru and bartended through Peru for 3 months last year. And we were talking about that and how much they love wine and how much I love wine. And that's, I'm still Facebook friends with them to this day. And then that's one example. There was another example. I met this lovely husband and wife sitting at one of the casinos in Vegas. I used to live in Vegas. I lived there for 3 years. And I was just at one of the casino sports books for Super Bowl Sunday, me and a buddy. And they were sitting right behind us. And we started chatting up and they've stayed in touch ever since. So like we come to Vegas every year for the Super Bowl, no matter who's playing, just to watch it in the casinos and be on that Vegas vibe. So keep in touch with them. And I'm trying to think of, there's just so many cool examples. Just, do what you love wherever you are. Cooking classes, I try to take a lot of those. Like I try to salsa and bachata also whenever I can. Really into coffee and wine tours as well. But so many people I know that do so many different things. They'll do like an active class, or they'll compete in a race wherever they go, or try to rent a bike wherever they go. But things that interest you, you'll find your people wherever you go.
Yeah, I definitely feel like anything to do with food and wine lends itself well to friendship. Like food tours, I have met so many people on food tours in Japan. I made a lot of friends that way, not even in the hostels, just bonding with people on food tours and then afterwards going out to karaoke. And like you said too, with the ages, I always think back to this trip that I took in Portugal, and there was a lunch included, and it was me and I think 3 older French couples, and they like adopted me for the day, took me out to lunch. I speak a little bit of French, but not
Oh.
great, but enough to get by. And they were just so super sweet. And when it was time to pay, they paid for my lunch. They like refused to take my money, and they were like, "You always have a home with us
So
in
nice.
France." And I was like, "Oh my God, you guys are wonderful." But it's
That's
so
so
true that you
sweet.
can like really connect, especially with the food tours and the wine tours. Something about food just makes people happy.
Yeah, it's true. I think, you have to eat wherever you go to sustain yourself. So it's a big commonality that we have all over the world.
Yeah. And I think it's also good to like it's nice when you do meet people abroad when you're able to kind of maintain those friendships. But I also think it's okay when you meet people and it's like a temporary, situation. So when I went to Croatia, we did like this boat trip. So we spent the whole entire day and it was probably a group of like 15 of us from all different
Hmm.
parts of the world. And we were all kind of hanging out and like we connected with a couple of the women that were on the tour and like the whole entire day we were hanging out with them on the boat and it was great. And at the end of the trip, our boat captain was so sweet. He was like, "Hey, I'm gonna send you guys if you guys want. Let's start a group chat, and I can send you pictures that I." Took from throughout the day. So we started like a WhatsApp and then over the Christmas holiday, and this was back when I met them was in September. Completely forgot about all these people. For Christmas, he actually sent like Merry Christmas, hope everybody's doing well. And everybody kind of like
Oh,
started chiming in, sending pictures of themselves wherever they were in the world. And I was like, oh my gosh. So like for like a couple of, hours, we were all kind of chatting back and forth. And we haven't talked since Christmas, but I thought it was nice that we reconnected after we hadn't spoken for,
yeah,
months. So it was so sweet to still have like a little bit of a bond with these people that, we met
100%.
and only spent a few hours with.
One of my favorite examples is pretty recent too. I went to the Philippines for like 6 weeks, November 2023, and I went on this boat tour, like this multi-day boat tour that goes through Palawan, like from Coron to El Nido, which are 2 separate islands. You could do it in like 8 hours on a fast ferry, but you could also do it the really cool way and spend 4 days camping out on different islands every night. Much rather do that, but the boat carries like 18 passengers. For some reason, like 11 of the passengers were Dutch and none of them knew each other. A lot of them were traveling together, like whether it was like a couple, there was a brother sister duo, there were just friends, best friends. We had the most fun. We were all like 20s and 30s. We had the most fun I've ever had, like on a multi day boat tour. And we all were obsessed with each other. And it was so much fun. After we got off that boat, we all hung out for another 4 days. And then I was like, hey, you guys, I'm coming to London and the Netherlands in May. Like, let's hang out. And so I spent 2 weeks hopping around between like all the Dutchies' houses and staying with all of them. And we kept in touch for those 6 months in between. And I still keep in touch with a lot of them. And they're like, you always have a home here when you visit the Netherlands. But I just thought it was so sick how, like, you guys, we only spent 4 days together and we are like obsessed with each other. And we spent 4 more days together and then we reunited in Amsterdam.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's like you never
It's the
know when you're
best.
going to make that connection. I mean, like I
100%.
said earlier in the episode, usually when I travel and I'm with my husband and my daughter, so we're kind of like in our own little bubble and circle. And for me, I never really, kind of chit chat with people that much as he does. But when I travel
Yeah.
by myself, it's a completely different story. I'm like chatting, talking to every single person I meet and like a little social butterfly. But I think it is nice to kind of make those connections when you're traveling, whether you're traveling by yourself or even traveling as a group. I know like with my friend Michelle, she's like a social butterfly all the time. Everywhere we go, she's chatting with people. So when we went to Croatia, I'm
Oh,
like meeting
yeah.
all these people. She's like, oh, I just met this person over at the bar. He's from such and such. And I'm like, okay, nice. And like,
Yeah.
here we are,
Who's this
friends.
person?
Yeah, we met
Yeah.
like this kid. It was so funny. We went to this bar. So she's a huge soccer fan. So we wanted to see a game. So we found like this cool Irish bar. So we're hanging out there. There was
And there's
nowhere to
Irish
sit.
bars everywhere you go. You notice that? Irish
Everywhere,
bar
everywhere.
everywhere.
All over
There,
the place.
Yeah.
so much fun. We had so much fun. So we get to this bar and there was like no seats. There was one table and there was this young kid there and he was like, hey, you guys can sit here. So we're like, okay, cool. So we started chit-chatting with him. He was from like I think the UK and he was traveling solo. So we were chatting with him for
Oh,
like 2 or 3 hours. Then I like motherly instinct. I was like, oh, let's make sure you get home safe, walk you to like your Uber. He was like in his early 20s. So
That's
like,
so
I'm
cute.
sure
yeah, he
my child.
appreciated that.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool. And like now we're like friends like on Instagram. So I was like showing Mike. I
Aw.
was like, oh, this is the kid from the bar in Croatia.
I also feel like those like generational friendships, those intergenerational friendships are so important too. I don't think I placed a lot of value on them until I got older, of course, because now I'm like, I need to know people, you know, who are older than me and younger than me. But when I was young, I don't think I cared about them as much. And now I'm like, I should have, but I love that warms my heart to see those types of friendships too, because
Yeah.
that's how you like learn about the world, keep updated. Like, what is that generation's mindset like, you know, whether they're older or younger? Like, it's always very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I
Exactly.
feel like you can learn so much from people who are in a different generation than you knew, like you said, whether they're like older or younger. And I'm the same way. I think when I was in my early 20s, I cared less about that. But now that I'm in my 30s, I like having friends from a wide variety of ages. I feel like it just gives you a
100%.
broader perspective of the world. So, speaking of which, so I guess a common mistake would be just like sticking with your own age group. What other common mistakes do you feel like people make when they travel and try to make friends? Because I do feel like there are a lot of faux pas out there. And I know I get asked
Yeah.
this a lot, like, how do I make friends? What mistakes should I not make?
I think one thing I learned the hard way was maybe like to kind of drop your expectations, right? Like you're not going to come out of it maybe meeting the love of your life or your best friends for life. I just got lucky that I met some of my best friends on the road, right? But yeah, I think just going with the flow and knowing that a lot of these friendships may only be a day or 3 days, you know, and they may be the company that you keep for that time, just leaning into them with more curiosity versus expectation. Or like, especially if they're from another country, another part of the US, different cultures, different generation. Oh, like, you know, how do you feel about this? What do you think about that? Like just seeing how they live their lives, what they think about things, how they see the world around them. Leaning in with that curiosity, I think, like lead with that versus.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Rosa and I, we talked about this on our second episode, all about love on the go, and how like sometimes you have these expectations, like, oh, I'm going to meet the great love of my life in Italy or something, and you can't be bummed out when that doesn't happen, because like sometimes you can
I
get
know.
lucky, but other times may just be for a season, not for life.
Yeah. And then it should need to be for you, not for like this part of you that thinks you need to be meeting the love of your life, right? Otherwise, you're not going to enjoy the entire trip if you have that expectation of this is what I should be doing while I'm here. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. Like always drop the expectations. And also like
Mhm.
read the room a little bit. If somebody's like acting really disinterested and on their phone, they may not want to be friends, and that's okay.
You just have to roll with the punches, and it's easier said than done. But for people that can't, or that's hard for them, and they don't know how to, then you know, take a step back and maybe try again tomorrow. Like, it doesn't all have to happen right then and there. As much as an extrovert as I am, and how I want to meet people, there are so many trips and so many days where I'm like, I don't want to speak to a single soul today.
Yeah.
I want to go into this hotel room that I spent many dollars for and I just want to sleep or I want to rest or I want to decompress on my own in the AC, whatever it is, you know? As an extrovert, I still do a lot of that. And I think I value it more than I did, say, 10, 15 years ago, for sure.
You know,
Yes.
I value like my quiet time constantly, like especially at work. I'm constantly getting questions, giving people directions, you
Yeah.
know, how to do something. So when I can like kind of decompress, even when I travel, you know, conferences or like on a press trip as a content creator, it's nice to be able to connect with people. But I like kind of just retracting to like my room, even if it's for like an hour or
Yeah.
two, and just kind of having like some time. I remember the first time I went for a work trip and we were all hanging out. We had like an hour or two before we had to get ready for dinner. And I remember going into the room and then I was just like walking around in t-shirt and like didn't have like pants on. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most liberating thing.
Yeah.
I was there. I didn't have to talk
Yes.
to anyone. I was just like in my
Yeah.
t-shirt watching the Hallmark channel for like 2 hours. I didn't even want to leave the hotel room. And my
It's so
coworkers like, you
nice.
know, talking about what they were doing. And I was like, listen, I had the time of my life. I opened the little thing
100%.
from the little bottle of vodka from the minibar. I was watching the Hallmark channel, sitting in bed with no pants on. Like it was so liberating. I was like, I need to do this more often. Like even if it's to like
Yeah.
rent a hotel room or go by myself just to relax. So, you know,
Yeah.
making those friendships is pretty cool, but I think, you know, kind of having some time to kind of decompress. And I think like Rachel said, you can't force situations either.
Absolutely not.
You might be with a group of people. That person might not be interested. Maybe they're going through something, or this is
Mm-hmm.
not that type of trip for them. As in, reading the
Yeah.
room and
Yeah.
kind of being understanding and taking a step back also.
That takes practice to kind of identifying that, and sometimes you might make a mistake, but that's fine.
All
All is
good.
forgiven.
Don't beat yourself up. And like worst comes to worst, you'll probably never see them again anyway. So who really cares?
Yes.
Exactly.
That's what I
It's
have to
very
tell
come and go.
myself with dining alone, because I still have like hangups with that. Not when I'm at the bar, but if I'm like at a table for one, I have to like remind myself, if these people are judging me, at least they won't see me again. It's all good.
Yeah, no, that's true. Actually, with dining alone, though, I've become very good at, I don't know, even there's something about if I'm dining alone, I definitely do not want to be looking at my phone unless it's emergency. Because for me, that is the ultimate time to practice being off your phone and disconnected. Like people are like, then what do you like look at? Or like look at your food, look around you, smile at someone. Like you don't even have to do it with the goal of making friends. But I was like, dude, how did people used to do it before 2006? You know what I'm saying? They used to do it all the time.
Yeah. That's so true.
So
I
I
had
practice that a lot.
one press trip actually years ago. So another way to make friends, if you feel confident enough to sit at a bar alone, I think it's great. And
Mhm.
this press trip, it was right after COVID and it was in California and I was sitting at the bar and the gentleman next to me was much older. He could be my dad. And apparently he was a bus driver for a local school district. So we didn't talk about travel
Cool.
content creation, but right away we got into a conversation about like working at a high school and education and bouncing back from COVID. And we talked, no joke, for like 3 hours. And
Love
by
that.
the end of it, like I had like 3 IPAs. And by the end of it, I was just like, oh, I have to use the restroom. I'm going to just leave my $1,000 camera with you. I'll be right back. And I just like went off to the
Oh my
bathroom. And
gosh.
he was laughing. He was like, do you trust me because I
A
work at a
trusting
school?
heart.
And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, when you both work at a school, you have a bond. I knew you weren't going to touch my camera.
Yeah, good.
You never know where you're going to meet that friends or have that unexpected bond. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think we kind of share a lot, but one takeaway is just kind of being open to the opportunity of making friendships wherever you are. And it's even great when you can continue those friendships, right? Beyond the trip and maintaining that. And like every relationship, everything takes work. So, communicate, maybe send a meme, FaceTime once in a while. Just put in the work because obviously if it's someone that you want to have in your life, you want to make sure that, you're kind of committing to that, even if it's just a platonic friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't worry about being awkward if it's like years later. Like if I received a meme from someone I traveled in a hostel with in Germany years later, I would love that. I would be like, oh my God, how are you doing? I would be so excited. So don't ever feel awkward about reaching out. Like obviously, like read the room if you don't get a response and you don't get a response. But don't be afraid to rekindle those friendships that may have been on the back burner for a couple years.
Amen.
Awesome. So, Leah, if you had to give one piece of advice for someone who's kind of traveling abroad or even domestically as far as getting out there and making friends, what would that be?
Start small. And I give this piece of advice even if you want to travel on your own for the first time and not make friends. It could be, sitting at the bar, right? Sitting at a hotel lobby bar, striking up a conversation. It could be trying something like a new martial arts class in your town or a cooking class in your own town. It could be maybe you have an interest in photography, you want to get started going to a meetup. Or it could be asking friends who are maybe well connected or know other people in different industries, say, hey, do you know anyone I might be able to have a conversation with? Or do you know of any events in that industry? Or can you connect me with anyone who, does that type of thing, host these kinds of meetups, whatnot? Like it can all start in your own town, which it should, because then you can practice getting comfortable. I know people are like, oh, what if I run into this person? Like you have to let go of the shame, You can have it for a first time or two, but I mean, we're all human. So best advice is to start small, start local if you're really feeling insecure about it or unsure about it. And then definitely head to another country and then put it all into practice again.
Yeah, that's really good advice. When I moved for my teaching job, I actually started a book club and made a lot of friends through that. So just like starting small
Awesome.
and starting local is perfect, and get yourself out there. And if you embarrass yourself, who cares? Like we're all human.
Yeah.
I've embarrassed myself more times than I can count. So it's all good.
Yeah, it's fine. Also, no one Like, I've learned this the hard way so many times. No one cares. They're going to forget about you in 2 minutes. You're less than
Seriously.
that. Because it's almost, I didn't even think of this until like a few years ago. It's a very self-centered way to think. If you're like, oh my God, it's so embarrassing. I'm so like, it's going to be so embarrassing. People are going to be thinking about me. People are looking at, they're not. People are worried about themselves. It might laugh for like a second or think about it for a second, but everyone is so consumed with what's going on in their own life. Like, they're not going to remember. Oh my God, do you remember when Rachel like tried to say hi to those people and they like totally did not fist bump her? Do you remember that 5 years ago? Like, no one cares.
Doing that all these years later. I would like to think I'm that memorable, but like really I'm not. So it's so true. It's like they're gonna forget about you.
Yeah. Yeah, right? And for the better, I guess, especially if you do something embarrassing. But yeah,
Me
in
about
this
it.
I mean, those are the
overstimulated
best
world,
stories,
they
though.
definitely will.
Those are the best
Yeah,
friendship.
exactly.
I love it. But Leah, thank you so much. We had so much fun having you on the show today. So tell everyone where they can find you on socials.
Thank you, ladies. This was so great. And like I said, congrats on starting your
you.
podcast.
Thank
It's
you.
such a great medium to have. I'm LA in flight anywhere. LA, like my initials are LA and Los Angeles because they're both my initials and I live in LA. But LA in flight anywhere, any social platform, or you can find me on Tickets Anywhere podcast, and we drop an episode every other Wednesday, and we are on anywhere you listen, also YouTube or our website.
Awesome. Thank you again,
Fantastic.
Leah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. And be sure to listen to her podcast, everyone, because she's awesome. We loved having you on. And yeah, for all of you out there, we love you guys, and we will see you in the next one. Till then, bon voyage, besties. Go out and make some friends.